When people are really defending pasteurized dairy, pasteurized milk, they come in to this discussion with the wrong frame of mind. And that is that nature is dangerous. Bacteria is bad. It's scary. Pasteurized dairy, it is kind of a processed food. It is different. And it's just when you take a step back, it's funny to think that we are smarter than nature. Like we know what's best, right? And we think that something coming from nature, raw dairy, is inherently bad. Welcome back to the Rooted in Resilience podcast. Today, Sarah and myself, we are the Strong.Sistas, and we are sisters in pursuit of optimal health and sharing our journey along the way and hoping to inspire others to, take control of their health journey and make steps towards improvements. And so today, we're going to be talking about a controversial topic today in today's day and age, and that is raw dairy. So why do people say that raw dairy is better for you? And why are people so afraid of it and think that if you have one sip of raw dairy, you're going to die, right? So we'll be diving into some of those and what the benefits of raw dairy are, what some of the misconceptions are. And this is one of my favorite topics because I love studying what our ancestors used to consume. So we're going to dive into a few fun, nuanced things that, some of you guys may have never heard about in raw dairy because I like going down rabbit holes. So we're going down raw dairy rabbit holes today. But who is this?
Yes, so today we have a special guest. So on the first podcast of this season, we talked about our funny farm and our collection of different animals.
Sarah's baby fever.
Namely poultry, yes. And so one of our birds came along today. So this is Pip. She is an inside bird. She is a starling rescue, and she will be commenting today. Probably not. She's a young bird. She does not talk yet, but
Pip's really great. I know you probably think that Sarah's insane, but Pip is really great. She has such a fun personality.
She's very sassy.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And we sing to her every night.
We do. Yeah, she will just be here for fun. We thought you guys would maybe enjoy seeing some of our animals come in, be special guests on the podcast.
Stay tuned for some special guests coming up.
She's going to do a pooey, so we're going to go back.
So, raw dairy. What is raw dairy?
Dairy product stemming from milk, the original dairy product that has not been pasteurized, so not heated in any way, and comes directly from the animal's teat. All dairy will technically originate from milk that came from the teat, but this milk in particular, like I said, has not been heated, so it's considered raw. So it still contains all of the original bacteria, which sounds like a bad thing, but there's good bacteria. And there's, of course, in the world, there's bad bacteria, but I feel like the word bacteria often scares people, but it's not always a bad thing. And probiotics and enzymes. So that's kind of what I would consider.
Well, I think it's a little bit dangerous to say like any heating of any kind, because I think people think that they have to consume raw dairy in its cold form straight from the fridge. But all ruminant animals like cows, goats, sheep, they're warm-blooded mammals like us, right? So we are 98 degrees Fahrenheit inside of us, right? A big cow, it's hot, right? Like the animal's hot. And so milk actually comes out of the teat around 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So you can still heat your milk slightly, just slightly. You can get like a little thermometer and just heat it on the stove. And so then you can enjoy it warm. There's a huge difference between like warming your milk to a temperature that's like comfortable. If you scalded it like they do in pasteurization, like going up in high temps, that would like burn your tongue. It'd be really, really hot. So you can still heat your milk and it's still raw because it comes out of the teat around 104 degrees Fahrenheit.
So funny story about that. When we had our milking goats, so like Hosanna and Sparkle, even if it was like winter outside and my hands were cold, milking from their teats were very warm, and the milk that would come out would like kind of create this steam in the bucket because it's mixing with the outside air, and so you just see that. So yeah, I can confirm. It was actually really nice because it would be freezing in the middle of winter, and I'm like, I don't want to go milk, but their little teats would provide nice little hand warmers, so I'd get through it. I
So
wish
don't be afraid to warm up your milk slightly. Don't boil it and scald it, but you can warm it up if you want to enjoy like a hot cocoa or a raw milk with maple
you
syrup
can
or
still
honey.
have a raw milk hot cocoa.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, a little tangent on the heating up side. So you mentioned that if you were to consume the milk at the temperature that it's pasteurized, you would burn your mouth. So there's a lot of different like vat pasteurization or,
Yep.
what is the like high temp?
So there's 3 main types, and it's
Yes, explain please.
the main, like when you go to when you go to the grocery store and get just standard pasteurized milk at the store, that likely has gone through something called high temp short time, HTST. And that's like raising to a certain temperature for just a short period of time. And that does like go above what is considered raw.
And
So
so the
it
point of that
pasteurizes it.
is it's killing off all of the bacteria.
Yep.
So the good and potentially any bad.
Well, that's a misconception. It doesn't kill off all the bad bacteria. And
Okay.
so it kills off some, right? And so if you're killing off it, but it doesn't like say, okay, good bacteria, you can keep living, bad bacteria, bad. It does it all, right? And so it's like your gut microbiome. When you take an antibiotic and you get rid of all of it, then anything that comes in can then take hold. Whereas raw dairy, it has a microbiome. And so good bacteria can like ward off bad bacteria. It's like it has defense mechanism built in.
So if it doesn't kill all the bad bacteria necessarily, does it kill all the good bacteria necessarily?
Yeah.
So why though? Why would it only kill the good bacteria,
It's
not the bad
reduced,
bacteria?
drastically reduced, drastically
Okay.
reduced.
So
So I'm
there's
just saying
still bacteria.
it's not
There's
all.
bacteria in and on everything, people.
Exactly, because no, this is important. This is important frame of mind to start with, because when people are really defending pasteurized dairy, pasteurized milk, they come in to this discussion with the wrong frame of mind. And that is that nature is dangerous. Bacteria is bad. It's scary. We got to wipe clean. You can't. We can't live in sterile labs,
Well,
right?
that's an interesting point because people familiar with the repeat community, there's a lot of talk about kind of keeping a sterilized micro or gut, basically.
Yeah.
So I've seen some people in that community particularly suggest drinking pasteurized milk, or they are more of a fan of pasteurized milk, or some people are more a fan of raw milk. Obviously, not everybody agrees on everything. But yeah, I think that that's an interesting concept. What you're getting into is this idea that we shouldn't always be, it's like the idea of using hand sanitizers. We shouldn't always have these like white gloves on or sanitizing our hands because then you're never building that natural immunity and diversity that you hopefully came out of the womb with. I know not all of us did, but that's obviously the ideal scenario for a human. And so I'm kind of seeing this as like raw milk kind of mimics that. It's the ideal scenario coming out. And then what the human does to it is kind of either going one way or the
It's
other.
I am if someone does great on pasteurized dairy, pasteurized milk, that's amazing, right? But it is inferior to raw dairy. Like raw dairy, it is different foods. I'm going to share some interesting information. Like pasteurized dairy, it is kind of a processed food. It is different, and it's just a when you take a step back, it's funny to think that we are smarter than nature. Like we know what's best, right? And we think that something coming from nature, raw dairy, is inherently bad. And big food, big agriculture companies, they want you to be afraid of that. They want you to think that way because pasteurization requirements, pasteurized dairy, it makes the centralized food system take hold. So then they have control. They wouldn't make money off of raw dairy. You know, they can't. They can't because pasteurized dairy comes from a bunch of different farms. They've got these big tankers that picks up milk at a bunch of different farms. So it's very similar to the meat industry where your ground beef patty at a fast food place is a combination of beef from hundreds of farms. So there's a lot of these foodborne illnesses that come out of ground beef and other meats. It's processed from all these different things. Of course, you're going to have problems when you mix all these different things, but raw dairy from a good source, like a good, clean farm that's raising healthy animals, it's single point origin. So it's just like a totally different ballgame. You're mixing with pasteurized dairy, you're mixing a bunch of different milk from a bunch of different farms. So of course, there's going to be some problems there. And then it also doesn't allow them to do confinement operations. Like confinement is very profitable for big food, centralized agriculture, because it's a perpetuating cycle where there's just more and more dependence on pharmaceuticals, pesticides, and all these things. And so that type of model doesn't work with raw dairy because that's not safe. It's not safe to consume raw dairy from a setup like that, where insecticides are used, all these pesticides, vaccines, antibiotics, like all these pharmaceutical interventions. And so it's kind of like a completely different food. Yeah. And one of the biggest problems, and I think that this is kind of like a consistent theme, is fortification. So many people may not know this, but most of the dairy that's pasteurized in the US at the store is fortified.
Definitely if it's the skim.
Yeah. And many people think fortification, ooh, good, right? But the whole concept of fortification, again, it's this mindset that we're smarter than Mother Nature and we know best. But it breaks food down into just vitamins and minerals. But the whole food matrix is so much more than vitamins and minerals. Like raw milk isn't just vitamins, minerals, and macronutrients. It contains so much more. And to think that we can go in and just fortify it it's funny. It's
So
entertaining.
fortification is typically vitamins A and D added
Yep.
to the milk. Is there anything else that they're adding?
Ooh, all right. So let me pull this up.
I didn't know to ask that, but it seems you came prepared.
Yes. It's just when you look at things like this, it's like, okay, we can pasteurize it and remove nutrients, and then we can just fortify it back, right? Like, oh, well, let's just add those vitamins and minerals back, and it's back to where it's supposed to be. No, right? Like, you can't do that. So the unfortunate thing is that most of the pasteurized dairy at the store is fortified, and
Even
that
if
includes
it's whole milk?
even whole milk. So, for example, Organic Valley 100% grass-fed milk, it is ultra pasteurized and it's fortified with vitamin D3. And so is Horizon Organic. And so people think, oh, good. But okay.
There's also, though, milk that's fortified with like omega-3.
Oh, we'll get into that. So when you try to mix water and oil in a cup,
The oil just sits on top.
so how do you mix fat soluble vitamins, A and D? How do you mix that into milk?
You got to add something to it, right?
Exactly. And guess what? They don't have to add that onto the ingredient list.
Hmm.
So these vitamin A and D that they fortify milk with, they come in what's called vitamin packets. And I went down some rabbit holes and found some vitamin packets. Okay. So here's one. You're going to love this. It is called vitamin A and D3 1 to 100 canola oil. So the ingredients.
What is the 1 to 100 thing?
I don't know.
Do we not know?
I don't know. This company is called IFPC, and it is a way for milk producers to add vitamin A and D3. You can't just simply take the milk and just put vitamin A and D3 into the milk. That just doesn't, that's not how science works. You have to be able to mix it in so it like is suspended in the milk fluid. So the ingredient statement on this, which most people use, is it on an ingredient list, the order that it's listed, is that the like highest?
Yeah, generally the first is like the most in there.
Okay. Ingredient statement: canola oil, sorbitan monoelate, polysorbate 80, vitamin A palmitate, and vitamin D3. So we're basically adding canola oil and preservatives, synthetic preservatives, to milk
Doesn't
in the name of
So the
fortification.
preservatives are funny because doesn't pasteurized milk go bad like within a shelf life of what? I don't know what it is. Is it a week? Is it 2 weeks?
Yeah, exactly.
Because raw dairy doesn't necessarily go bad. It just
Clabbers.
sours. Yeah, you can make clabber out of it. So that's fascinating. So they're adding the preservative and it still doesn't do the trick. Why is that? Because the pasteurized dairy is missing just those natural good bacteria that are going to keep the fermentation going, or what's happening there?
Why pasteurized milk goes bad?
Yeah, like in comparison to the raw milk that just continuously gets more and sour and clabbers.
Exactly like I said in the beginning, with pasteurization, you don't remove all bacteria because you can't completely sterilize anything. We are living with microbes. They're everywhere. So you can't like completely sterilize milk and then expect like nothing to be left. There's something to be left, and plenty of things can take hold in those type of scenarios. Whereas with raw milk, it has an established microbiome. And so if something bad comes in, it can be crowded out by good. So there's so many problems with this. Honestly, I tried to find studies and there aren't many, but what happens with pasteurization if this vitamin pack gets like mixed in? Do these ingredients get oxidized? Do these lead to harmful lipid peroxide products?
Why would they be oxidized?
Because you're heating it.
So when you heat it at home, though, but I'm assuming that these ingredients are added after the pasteurization process. Why though? Because like the vitamin, especially if it's skim, like it hasn't been removed, the A and D.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure, truthfully.
Why?
So that's for the A and D. Okay.
Okay.
And then there's another one that I found. It's from the same company, and this is just for the vitamin D.
So this company, their profit margin must be just like insane because the canola oil is like the cheapest thing. And then I'm sure it's not like the highest quality, finest vitamin A and vitamin D.
Well, okay, so ingredients. So it says vitamin A, D, and 3, 1 to 100 canola oil contain the following because it asks bioengineered status. So bioengineered is this new term to cover genetically modified. It's like one and
Oh,
the same,
okay.
right?
Oh, bioengineered.
Bioengineered sounds fancy. Ingredients that are not produced from a food on the list of bioengineered foods. Canola oil sourced from non-bioengineered canola. Guess what? Still contains the same amount of PUFA, still contains the same oxidizing potential, still canola oil. And then it says sorbitan monoylate and polysorbate 80, so the preservatives and like antioxidants, are sourced from corn that is bioengineered, but the ingredients do not contain detectable modified genetic material.
Great.
Who's testing that? Can we just blindly test that or trust that? So yeah, this is the nutritional profile per 100 grams of this mix. 72 grams of fat from canola. It's pretty much just fat.
How much do they add per gallon of milk?
Now it's not much. It's not going to be much. It is minuscule. That's added to each milk. I will acknowledge that.
It wouldn't be enough to change the fat percentage on the milk.
That's a whole nother conversation that we will get into.
Oh.
But okay, it says 1 milliliter into 100 quarts of milk or more.
So 1 milliliter, what's 1 milliliter like in
I'm good
comparison
at
to 100
unit conversions
grams?
in my head. But essentially that is something that you're consuming every day, right? And those type of ingredients and things, like, you think that you're just drinking milk, but it's like, this is not milk. This is a processed food. It's not in this like mindset of, oh, we're smarter than nature. We can add this back in. It's insanity. You then, when you have this mindset that nature is dangerous and bad and that we're smarter, then people mass accept these types of ridiculousness things.
Well, I think what's like most ridiculousness is that that's not disclaimed on the label.
No, they can't. So when you look at a milk label, it just says milk, vitamin D3 and vitamin A, or just milk and vitamin D. They don't have to put these other ingredients, but these other ingredients are used.
So this is only with the fortified pasteurized products. So if
But
it's not,
most are fortified.
I know, but there are some like a Kelowna, I would say.
Shout out to two major key companies, Alexander and Kelowna.
Yeah. And then I think there's like I remember at our local store, there's like some small players who are local who might offer like similar product to Kelowna or Alexander.
But any reduced fat have to.
Right. So the skim, and that's why I remember this because the skim always still did. So
So that's for the milk that's fortified with vitamin A and vitamin D3. So that's any sort of 2% or reduced fat. Now, then there's just the vitamin D mix. So this one's called Dairy House Vitamin D3 1 to 100.
Dairy House?
Dairy House. And this is still the same company, IFPC. And again, I don't understand why this is added to milk. Whole milk. This is added to whole milk.
Not all whole milk or most whole milk?
Most whole
Most
milks.
whole milk.
That's even.
And it will say on the label, like, fortified with vitamin D.
It doesn't necessarily have to say it on the front of the milk container, but it will say in the ingredient list milk and vitamin D3. But it also is, again, you can't just drop vitamin D3 into milk and just expect it to work. It's these vitamin packs. So this IFPC vitamin D3 1 in 100, the ingredients are water, propylene glycol preservative, polysorbate 80, and vitamin D3. So this is an example of like what they call a water packet vitamin pack, but like, okay, I would love to get some propylene glycol and polysorbate 80 with my milk. Yum.
You know what's funny about this all is this idea of adding these nutrients. Like, okay, so now they're adding this to whole milk, and nothing's been taken away from the whole milk, right? Like we didn't take the cream, so technically all of the vitamin profiles should still be the same. They're adding this with the good intention for the population,
Exactly.
which is honorable. However, you can't take into consideration the entire population's diet, everybody's individual thing that they eat per day, or their supplements that they take. Almost everybody's taking a vitamin D supplement.
And then let's
Yeah.
just load it
So,
on.
like, and then apply this to like every single food that's fortified. So then the technical processed diet in America is then just fortified with a bunch of different things. So, like, how do you ever know?
Exactly.
Unless you're going to track the food in Chronometer, for example, you could just be getting like in a massive amount of some nutrients because of the fortification building up on all the different products. And obviously, everybody who's listening to this podcast most people are well aware that the standard American diet is just not ideal in any case. And I actually think that this good attempt to fortify in some ways can backfire on people too because of this.
The government fortification programs, all of them have been oops, right? So we've got
They're still oopsing because we've oopsied again.
We're always oopsing. And that's because of this mindset coming in that we are smarter, that we can somehow, that we better understand food. But the whole food matrix is so much more than vitamins and minerals. It is a literal living matrix that we haven't even scratched the surface of what whole food. There's so many studies documenting that in studies, whole foods will always outperform the synthetic version of the supplement. And they don't know why.
Whoa.
I know, exactly, right?
You
So
know,
synthetic calcium never performs as well as calcium from dairy. That's just well proven in the literature. And that's because it is a whole food matrix. We can't outsmart Mother Nature.
so in all the oopsies, would you say that the iron fortification is the biggest oopsie?
Well, there's the iodine in the salt, oopsie. There's iron fortification in our flour. And then the flour also is, quote, enriched with various B vitamins that have shown to be extremely problematic. What are other fortification?
I'm just aware of like the typical one in flour. It's like all of the vitamins, like, but most notably iron.
There's one of the vitamin B6 potentially that the synthetic version is like kind of very toxic in elevated levels. So enriched flour is
For some
dangerous.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the iron is what calls out to me. But then you kind of just like are so used to seeing the A and D in milk, and you're just like, it's just messaging that it's normal, it's okay. That it's kind of shocking
But
to hear this.
what if someone isn't reacting to dairy and they're reacting to these synthetic ingredients that are required to properly suspend these fortified vitamins in the milk? What if?
Or simply that they're reacting to the fact that it's no longer that whole food matrix, like you said. So the body doesn't maybe have all of the utensils required to properly digest it. Do you want to talk about that a little bit now?
That's where raw milk comes into play because it's like raw milk is so much more than just vitamins and minerals, right? There's so many bioactive compounds. There's immunoglobulins, cytokines, enzymes. What else am I missing? I wrote down a bunch. Hang on, let me pull up my notes. Living bacteria. So like raw dairy, raw cheese, raw milk, it is a Mother Nature's probiotic.
Lactoferrin too. Or is that in pasteurized?
That is a bioactive protein.
Okay,
Bioactive
bioactive
proteins are
protein.
destroyed, like lactoferrin, and we'll get into these a little bit more.
That's just reminding me, like, the bioengineered, like, they're using words to intentionally make it sound like it's a natural.
Yeah. But the more that we fear, like, normal food, the more that they can capitalize on that fear. And that's where the biggest problem comes in. So they want you to think dangerous, bad, trust us, right? And many people bring up like, "Oh, pasteurization has drastically lowered rates of disease." You've probably heard that. I think we've posted a number of times on our Instagram about raw dairy and then the swords of like, you know, centralized medicine trained nutritionists come in and just crap on our post saying how dangerous raw dairy is and how beneficial pasteurization has been. But I want to dive into that briefly.
Okay, we can dive into that. And I just wanna before this conversation, because maybe I guarantee, like, the only person to click on this episode is somebody who either hates raw milk or loves raw milk already,
Yeah.
right? So, like, let me learn why I love it more, or let me just, like, comment how much these girls are idiots. Like, it's one or the other, or maybe you're on the fence, I don't know. Usually people are one of the extremes. So, I mean, just thinking back of what we talked about so far and what we're gonna talk about more, I think this podcast is for the people who are just like, they don't even have to want to drink milk.
I'm not here to
Yeah, like,
convince.
you don't have to want to drink milk or not want to drink milk. I think it's more just like, here's just an awareness, because even if you hold on to a fear that doesn't, like, present itself every day in your life, that's still a fear.
Yeah.
And, like you've said, we've been set up to have this fear of this natural food.
Yeah.
And if we can reframe our mindset on it, that's just letting go of something that might have been holding you back from a lot of different other things in your life, or giving different things a try, that otherwise
Question
might
thing.
benefit you.
Question thing.
Exactly. So, like, just in a personal example, I love knowing all this because I right now I only make Brandon a breakfast and a lunch, and then he's kind of up to himself like the rest of the day until dinner. And I love knowing that he can just grab raw milk. And I feel so confident that he's just drinking a ton of raw milk because I'm like, yeah, get
That
that in,
calcium in,
get it
boy.
in. Like all the different
Yeah.
things that you talk about here. So even just maybe empowering or providing for somebody else in your life too, it's cool to know this information so you can encourage people to make a different decision for themselves.
When we go back to trusting Mother Nature and understanding that Mother Nature always knows best, it is very freeing.
Literally, that includes like everything, like whole foods, herbs, wild foods,
Farming practices,
farming
regenerative farming
practices. Yeah,
practices.
so basically what I was trying to say is I think that this conversation actually extends just the idea of dairy.
Yeah.
This conversation that we're having about all these different things that are set in place has happened to every single food group in the grocery store.
Because big food companies can't make money when you buy directly from
Yeah,
a farmer, and so they have to create this centralized processed food system with all these regulations and rules so that they remain in control and they make most of the dollar.
take a peel, right, on the produce, just this new thing. You really got me going on this. Like, I love how you've always said this, that they know what's best.
It's this I'm sorry, it's this, like, white man superior knowing mindset, and that extends to beyond just white men, but that's, like, this, like, group of, like, it's a superior, like, "Oh, I know," like Bill Gates, "I know better. I'm smarter than Mother Nature." I have a computer science degree.
Right, so anyway, back to milk. I just wanted to apply this to other areas in people's life so they if even if they're not like, "I don't really do dairy," well, think about this for every other food that you're eating.
Yeah. So, back to that, like, they have to instill the fear. And a lot of people are like, they bring up, okay, pasteurization has saved so many lives. It's reduced disease rates so much. Dive into that a little bit. I encourage people to dive in and assess what time period they're evaluating. Okay. Because raw dairy, okay,
Girl, you tell them.
we have humans have consumed raw dairy for over 7,000 years. Pasteurization was invented 100 years ago. What did we do before pasteurization? How did we survive? Did we die?
We died.
We wouldn't be here today.
We drank the mother's teats milk and we died.
And we died. Literally, babies are drinking raw milk every day from their mother's teats. Like, look, guys, let's be real here.
Same with like, just think about the animal.
Exactly.
The animal itself, the baby calf doesn't just drink from the teat and instantly heave over.
But that right there, people think that there is something just inherently dangerous about raw milk. Like something just about it is dangerous. No. How it gets contaminated with bad bacteria is what happens when it leaves the teats. When it leaves the teats. There is nothing about raw milk that is bad. Nothing. What happens after the teats? Of course, cleanliness is required, right? You can't have Pip in the milking. Pip is the bird here. You can't have Pip in the milking room and then she's sitting above and then poop in the milk. Like, no, right? Like, we don't want that. The milking sanitization is important.
But, okay, so like if I'm at home cutting vegetables for dinner, the cutting board and the knife sanitization, I shouldn't have just put like old raw chicken on the cutting board prior
on that.
It's just,
you have a higher likelihood of getting foodborne illness from lettuce and deli meats than you do raw dairy. And they don't talk about that.
Yes.
Because they can't pasteurize lettuce.
Oh, just wait.
They're trying to vaccinate produce. So that way,
I see.
They're trying to put vaccines in produce.
That's very important work.
You consume vaccines through your produce.
Oh, so I've seen the thing, this was related to dairy, but they're like the different cultures that they put in some cottage cheese and stuff.
Yeah.
I would love for you to go down that rabbit hole. I just give like, you take the rabbit hole from me. I don't want the rabbit hole. Go down that rabbit hole. I think that there's like some interesting things there of what they're putting into cottage cheese, like the different bacteria. Kind of like this idea of like, is that bacteria like the one we should always be eating regularly? Like, you know what I mean? Or what's the point of that bacteria? This might be like totally way offline here, but I think there might be something there.
Okay. Okay, so back to, raw dairy itself there's nothing inherently bad about it. It's what happens after the fact. And so, of course, raw milk
Sorry, quick question. Keep that thought going on the idea of cottage cheese, right? Because you can technically make raw cottage cheese.
Yeah.
So why, like if you make the raw cottage cheese, would you necessarily have to add the bacteria back in?
You don't have to, but it does help like with the curd formation.
Are you talking about the cultures or the bacteria? I'm talking about the bacteria.
Oh, interesting.
So
that's the same thing.
You've seen on cottage.
That's the same.
Are you sure?
Yeah. What does the word cultures mean to you then?
Cultures of bacteria.
Sarah learned something today.
That is fascinating. Okay, so
they just put one bacteria species in to each cottage cheese container.
No, but they only list like 3 or 4.
I know, but it's cultures of them.
Right. So the idea of cheese, that's how you make different types of cheeses.
Is different cultures.
Wow.
Yeah. So again, like,
and different tastes.
They make you.
So bacteria are like the different reason for taste too.
Yes.
Wow, that's so fascinating.
Yeah.
I would love to be in this, like in the creation of that.
Well, you wouldn't.
I wouldn't at all. I'm just saying I would love to, the idea of it.
But it's interesting because our ancestors have like done so much with, bacteria species and these things. And now we're like led to be afraid of them.
Question.
Yeah.
Our ancestors back in the day. So like the original cheese of like Parmigiano Reggiano, were they adding bacterial cultures to that, or is that strictly animal rennet?
That's just animal rennet, milk and salt.
So there's no cultures to that.
Correct.
So question, it's often said that cheese is more easily tolerated for people.
Yeah.
Is it because of the lack of cultures that potentially are GMO made?
I don't think so. Our customers do totally fine with the different cheese varieties that we have, which require different cultures of like Gouda and mild cheddar and feta and things like that. The biggest thing is that animal rennet.
Instead of the one that's made from mold.
Exactly.
Which is in all cheeses.
Yes.
For the most part.
Now we're going down a rabbit hole that no one can understand except us in the conversation.
But
But also the Parmigiano Reggiano cheese is aged for a very long period of time.
Right.
And so that largely removes any of the lactose in the cheese as well. But yeah, Parmigiano Reggiano is this like staple food, and it is made with raw milk, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, back to where the point I was getting. Um, these like nutritionists and people bring up pasteurization has been a monumental thing for us, right? Because it has drastically reduced the amount of like disease rates and things.
That's just straight out of the textbook.
But it is accurate when you put the time point of early 1900s. And that's important to understand because for thousands of years, we're consuming raw dairy with animals living out on pasture, traditional farming methods, regenerative. It wasn't called regenerative agriculture at the time, but
It
animals
was
lived
absolutely
outside,
normal.
healthy animals, right? And then all of a sudden, urbanization started. People started moving to the cities. So then some genius thought of, okay, let's move the cows closer to the people. And they started bringing cows into the city. It's called urban dairies. And that started in the early 1900s. What do you think is going to happen when you bring cows into downtown Chicago?
Bad things.
Bad things. You
And
stuff them into small concrete areas. When you milk animals in those conditions, of course it becomes unsanitary. Of course it
yeah.
does. And so these statistics of like reducing, so at that time, people started drinking milk from raw milk from these urban dairies and they started getting very sick, like foodborne illnesses, deaths, tuberculosis, like all these problems. So, of course, pasteurization fixed those problems, but it masked the underlying issue. And the underlying issue was animal management and sanitization. But if we go back to what we were doing for thousands of years, is that pasteurization required anymore?
Not if we are not doing all the
So,
city stuff.
so there, these statistics that they're bringing in that pasteurized has like decreased the amount of like foodborne illness rates of milk and all that. Sure, relative to urban dairies, but what about relative to before? And we don't have that data, right?
Right.
But we wouldn't be around if it led to all these deaths. And something that they don't bring up is why at that time was milk, you guys, milk was a staple in our diet, like staple. And now we have lactose intolerance out the gazoo. We've got autoimmune conditions. What if we've changed the milk in the process to be less tolerable in that?
Well, I
So
think that's pretty evident because usually the case is people who can't tolerate pasteurized dairy, there's a good success rate of tolerating raw dairy. And that's not everybody, but it's that I don't think you really need more evidence than that.
that's a great anecdote. Like, how can you deny millions of people's experiences not being able to consume pasteurized dairy, but able to consume raw dairy? How can you deny that?
Yeah. And I think the elephant in the room is that, well, there's some people who have gotten sick from raw milk. But like
Yes,
you said, there's more people who have gotten sick from raw lettuce.
exactly. Yeah,
I think
exactly.
it just applies to every single food.
Exactly. So I just want to touch briefly on,
And while you're looking for that,
yeah,
I was chuckling while you were telling that story of the 1900s because I remember one of our like first when we really were started to post loudly about nutrition. One of our first posts was like this 10-part series of like dairy, and it was like each post was like 10 canvas images.
guys,
And
those are so much work.
I know, and I'm so glad we're at the point of now just talking about it because who really ever read those canvas posts? But they were so important, and I think that is one thing that you haven't talked about that I'm wondering if you could touch on. Remember you told me that they added something like blue? You know what I'm talking about? To change the like they added something to the milk due to the coloring or something like when it came in at that point. When they brought the cows to the cities,
Yeah.
they added something to the milk.
Oh, it's like a talk, something crazy.
Yeah.
And it was an attempt to reduce the amount of like rates of
I thought it
disease
was
development.
because the color wasn't as pure anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm not crazy,
No,
right?
no, you're right.
Yeah.
Like literally, milk was no longer white.
Crazy. That was the start of the fortifying. In a
Insanity.
sense.
Well,
Yes, it was no longer, like, white because of the conditions.
yeah, exactly. And that those urban dairies where you're stuffing cows into like the backside of breweries where they're eating like old spent grain from the brewery and not eating a natural diet on pasture, not getting sunlight, not grounding to the earth, living, breathing, eating their poop like all around them and then milking in those conditions. Like I would never want to touch that dairy either.
No.
But that was the start of confinement operations because they realized, oh, if we move things into a centralized area, we can have more control. The government regulations on milk started with pasteurization. Before then, there weren't those, right? Consumers could buy where they wanted to. So it was like, oh, the system actually works really well for us. How can we keep it here?
I mean, to be fair, there was a lot of changes going on at the same time. Lifestyle changes, right? Apparently, nobody wanted to milk their cows anymore. So we're all moving to the city, right? So I guess that's really what we have here, too, which is why it's so important that we do still have regenerative farmers and people who are producing milk the right way. So then we can create these like small farm groups, food clubs, cooperatives where you can access safe dairy products that are raw, as opposed to, you never would want to drink the raw conventional milk.
But you just brought up a really great point. Another reason for, if you're going to consume dairy, to find a source of raw dairy that you support and trust is you're literally supporting a better way of farming, because you can't find safe raw dairy that isn't regeneratively grown in like healthy animals, good pasture. If you're supporting more confinement, pasteurized milk, it's just a different style of farming. And so that is another benefit of raw dairy. You're literally supporting a better system. And the really unfortunate thing that no one brings up is this confinement, this centralization of the dairy has reduced our total number of dairies in this country from, like, I'm throwing out numbers and it's just from the top of my head. I'm going to have to get better numbers next time. But it was like over 600,000 dairies and it's now down to like 25,000. That's a huge reduction in farmers. And it's this go big or go home. And they actually don't make money. In a lot of dairy farmers, they're going out of business because centralized system pays them such low value for their milk. And another thing you have to think about is it because plant-based milk is so much more profitable? And so are they trying to, are they trying to kind of squeeze that out a little bit? There's all this.
Even in plant-based milk, like if you're going to drink plant-based milk, you should really make your own,
Oh my God.
because you can soak like almonds or soak the oats and stuff, because
It's not a milk replacement. It's not the same.
well,
It
yeah,
doesn't
that's why you
provide.
would call it MYLK, because like you said, it's, if you're thinking of milk itself, that has a very unique profile of nutrients and cofactors.
Soaking almonds and oats ain't going to give you the same nutrients.
Correct. But for people who aren't doing dairy, it's a nice alternative. And what I'm trying to get at is like, you still, like 99% of the brands are containing fortification or oils, etc.
Carrageenan,
Yeah, like
gums.
actual canola oil that's contributing to the nutritional
So
profile.
bad.
So it's almost one of those situations where, I mean, back in the day, maybe they did soak these things and made products out of them. So what I'm trying to say is nothing safe.
The food system is really bad. And that is a really challenging thing to navigate for people. And at the end of the day, we aren't smarter than Mother Nature. And the more that we can just like give her the tools and just trust and prioritize, like, if you have the financial resources to buy from regenerative farmers, please do so. Please do so. Your health your health will benefit, and you will also be supporting a better system. But
Definitely.
um okay, so a few other interesting things that I wrote down is there's all this controversial data on whether or not pasteurization destroys vitamins and minerals. Some tests show zero, like very similar, micronutrient vitamins and minerals. But remember, milk is so much more than that. However, I found some very interesting things that no one really talks about, and it's called milk stone. And it is on heating equipment for pasteurization. Up to 45% of minerals, including 15.7% of calcium, were present in residues on the heater of a plate heat exchanger for pasteurization. Interesting, right? So basically, the equipment that is used to pasteurize can sometimes get mineral buildup. Where's that mineral coming from? So it's, yeah,
So you're losing,
potentially.
losing some of the minerals that are stated to just be assumed to be in milk.
Yeah.
In the pasteurization process, potentially.
But that's vitamins and minerals. So it's important to realize that food is a lot more than vitamins and minerals, but that's kind of where we understand food at this point in time, right? I think it's important to remember human nutrition, there's so much more left to learn. So there's all these very interesting things that are destroyed from pasteurization. And in the process, pasteurized milk and raw milk, or pasteurized dairy products and raw dairy products, they're kind of completely different structurally. So one really interesting one is called the Wulzen factor. Wulzen, Wulzen factor. It was discovered in the 1930s by a female scientist, Rosalind Wulzen, Dr. Rosalind Wulzen in Oregon. And she discovered that her guinea pig study subjects would get calcification and stiff joints when they were consuming pasteurized dairy products. And then when they had raw dairy products, it went away. So it became known, Wulzen factor became known as the anti-stiffness factor. And it is a unique compound that isn't well studied. It kind of hasn't really been discussed since then much. It's not well studied, it's not well understood, and it's different than vitamin K2, which is like the X factor by Weston A. Price. But it is basically helping to deliver calcium where it should be going and ensuring that calcium isn't deposited in bad joints or in joints or arteries or things like that. Because when you get stiff, that is potentially calcium buildups at that joint, right? But interestingly, she also found that it is present in raw cane juice and also
Raw cane, like sugar cane?
sugar cane. So
Oh,
it's contained in molasses, raw molasses. But then when raw cane sugar is processed into like n- normal sugar that today, it doesn't contain it. So
oh
it's heat
no, we're
sensitive.
removing the
But isn't
Wulzen
that crazy that
factor.
the Wulzen factor is in that and raw dairy products?
I wonder why those two things uniquely, like if there's some sort of protective.
I'm wondering if the cows eat something that then makes it show up in their dairy. Like they eat some sort of grass. Like,
But then it wouldn't be in all dairy.
yeah, but this was in the 1930s when animals weren't as confined as they were today. So pasture-based diet was normal.
So the best bet here is to have a diverse pasture.
Exactly. So I thought that that was kind of interesting,
That
and it's
is,
not really discussed.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people who like this whole idea of calcification.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who say, "Oh, you need more calcium in your diet," and then there's people who say you have to avoid dairy, and this must be why.
Well, yeah. Calcium supplementation, again, us thinking that we like know better. There's interesting data that synthetic calcium supplementation can cause problems. And so that's
Right.
where the fear of
Yeah,
calcium.
people who say like calcification's coming from you're too much calcium, so drop the dairy in your diet. But maybe if we didn't remove this Wolzen factor, it
Yeah.
wouldn't have had the same effect on the body.
Yeah.
Well, that's really fascinating. I've never heard that before
Dr. Rosalind Walzen.
on her guinea pigs.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Ashley, we're not guinea pigs.
There's also data on calves, and then there's some follow-up studies. I don't have all them on my phone, but it hasn't been studied much. Like there's not much known
Yeah.
about it. It's a fat-soluble nutrient that is destroyed by heat, whereas vitamin K2 is another fat-soluble nutrient that's not destroyed by heat. So
So if it's a fat soluble nutrient, is it not present in the skim dairy products?
I'm guessing no, because she extracted it from raw cream to treat her guinea pigs, and she consistently showed that, yeah. So,
Okay. Well, that leaves a lot of nuance then,
oh,
because
for
then
sure.
you're wondering, well, should I not consume skim dairy? I think that the
The
idea
balance.
of the raw dairy itself, like you said, has so many different cofactors and benefits that you can't just extract one thing and think it's ruined.
Right,
You know what I'm saying?
right, right. Um, but I think when it comes to like raw dairy, I think that one of the reasons why it's a healing food. At the end of the day, like raw dairy is a healing food. And I think one of the reasons why people experience such benefits from it is because it provides a lot of the things needed for your body to digest it inside of it, right? So it gives your body the tools it needs to digest. And that's important for many people who are in a low metabolic, low thyroid state. Because when your body temperature drops, so let's say an optimal metabolism, optimal thyroid, you're 98 degrees Fahrenheit. At that rate, you have great enzyme production. You've got great rates of like reactions happening all throughout your body. There's this doctor that discovered just a half a degree drop in your body temperature leads to a significant reduction in that enzyme production. And then if you go to a full degree drop in your body temperature, that means less and less enzymes are being produced and utilized in your body. And if you want like chemistry, it makes sense because reactions are very like temperature dependent. So for someone that's in a low metabolic, low thyroid state, raw dairy could be healing because it's providing you those enzymes needed to digest it. Whereas someone maybe that does better with pasteurized dairy, maybe their body already has sufficient enzyme capabilities to digest it. So again, not saying that pasteurized dairy is bad. Like there are plenty of people who do fine with it. But there's also a reason why some people do good with it, with raw dairy. Yeah. But it's essentially, there's all these beneficial enzymes that help you better digest the micronutrients, the macronutrients in dairy. People say that raw dairy contains the lactase enzyme. That's not true. It contains a beneficial bacteria that you then that gets inhabited in your gut, and then that leads to a higher lactase production inside of you, which then helps you digest the lactose.
So technically, is that only going to be the case if you continuously consume raw dairy, or could that potentially allow somebody to consume pasteurized dairy in the future if they've repopulated that
Yeah, potentially.
bacteria?
Yeah, it
That's really
contains lactic
interesting.
acid bacteria that increases the production of lactase, improving digestion of lactose.
That's great.
So other things, immunoglobulins, cytokines like TGF beta, complex lipids like glycosphingolipids, and these like support nervous system function, cell structure, the lining of your gut. And they're basically like fancy fat structures. You've got simple fats, but then complex lipids have like sugars attached to them. And so they've got very like specific functions. And so raw dairy contains those where they are destroyed by pasteurization. And I think the another really cool one is the CD14 factor, and it helps neutralize endotoxins. So it like is basically able to help your body. Endotoxins are these like toxic byproducts from bad bacteria in your gut. Many people have endotoxin problems. And so CD14 can come and neutralize those, and that is abundant in raw dairy, which is cool. But I think one of the biggest things is that proteins are pretty sensitive to the heat treatment. And so, like you brought up, lactoferrin. So these are bioactive proteins, and lactoferrin, I think, is one of the coolest molecules, like a wonder molecule. Literally, in the literature, they literally label it as like the wonder molecule. It has anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer, antimicrobial effects, and that's likely due to its ability to bind to iron. So many people think, oh, I need more iron in my diet. You need it, but too much of anything is a problem. And excess iron is a big problem, especially with iron fortification that we're seeing when we're putting iron shards in all of our bread and our flours. So lactoferrin can bind to iron and help us better regulate that. And what do pathogenic bacteria need to thrive? Iron. So lactoferrin takes away its food source.
Yeah.
So that's why it's antimicrobial.
So iron shards, right?
Yes.
Remember that?
Tell them about your experience.
Yeah, I did this, like, it was a viral experiment that I tried, and it actually worked, where you would crush up a cereal that's been fortified with what we talked about earlier in this podcast, so iron is in there, and then utilize a magnet above the cereal, and hypothetically, it was supposed to, like, move the little black particles, the iron shards around, and it did. It was so crazy to see because, obviously, almost all of us have grown up on cereal. It's like, wow, each serving of that cereal, I was getting these little micro shards of iron in my diet, just eating that without knowing. It blowed my mind.
So pasteurization
We'll link
destroys,
that
yeah,
because you guys need to see that.
pasteurization destroys like some studies say like 90% of lactoferrin in milk, and it degrades it. Because again,
So
these are heat sensitive like protein structures.
what we've done is we've added the extra iron into the diet, and we removed the lactoferrin, which would remove it from the diet.
We are becoming iron men and iron women. No, but
Yeah.
seriously, iron overload is a big problem.
Yeah,
Dr. Ray Peat
not
talks
joking about
a
it.
lot
Yeah,
about it.
not
It's like
joking.
it's pretty serious. Okay. So Sarah mentioned this in the beginning. Clearly, like there's so many different structural things, and there's a reason why you see people who are able to finally get over their seasonal allergies. They're able to have a better gut health. Their like rates of just common colds go down. Their inflammatory bowel disease goes down. It lowers their inflammation, can help remove dental plaques, and it can help their gut recover after antibiotics. And so I think these different structural reasons explain why raw dairy can be really helpful for people. It really can. But you mentioned this in the beginning. Another classic example of like this fortification is you now see DHA, omega-3 added to milk. Milk is naturally low in DHA. Why do we think that we're better and can add DHA in the form of algae oil, which oxidizes in your digestive tract because it's a heat-sensitive omega-3, literally oxidizes in your digestive tract? Why do we think that this is okay?
Well, I'm assuming too that if they're going to add that, they're adding it in those same packets.
I didn't go down that rabbit hole.
Mm.
But yeah, I wonder how algae oil is
But
added.
technically, because it's a fat.
Who came up with this idea? Let's add algae oil to milk. Does it
To
taste
be
fishy?
completely honest, that just like doesn't sound appetizing to me.
Does
And
it
not
taste
even if you
fishy?
can't taste it, just the idea that it's there to me personally.
But it's advertised like on the labels like DHA for healthy omega-3
Yeah,
milk.
I've
There's a
seen
reason
that.
why it's low in milk naturally, you know?
I don't know, but I'm just saying, just
We
even
aren't
as a
smarter.
consumer,
Yeah.
to be like, give me a dose of that algae oil with that milk. I don't think I would really want to do that. So it really pays off to read the back of the carton. It really does. Like, in all things. It just, if that's the takeaway message of all this, is read the back of the
No,
package.
when you can, know where your food comes from.
Yes. And eat it in the whole pure form, not the processed form with the additives in it.
Yeah. But that's pretty much all I had for my notes. Do you have any follow-up questions from those?
No, I mean, I guess how would somebody go about finding a safe and reputable source of raw dairy?
Yeah, that is tough because again, you don't want to be consuming raw dairy from a unsanitary farm. You want to make sure that the animals are like pasture raised and have a more natural diet. Um, because we'll do a completely separate podcast on this, but they are changing the fatty acid composition of milk. People think that milk and beef meat are safe from animals being fed all of these like soybean and oil seeds and things like that, but no, they're changing it. So finding a place that feeds a little more natural diet, a little bit of grain is not the biggest issue. But having access to healthy pastures is pretty important for a healthy animal. But shout out to, Kelowna, Supernatural, and Alexander, and there's a few other brands, Strauss maybe? There's good dairy brands that aren't doing this fortification, and it's low temp vat pasteurized, which still leads to destruction of some compounds. It's just gonna happen, but, um, really good options, and you've heard I'm fairly certain, like, many people do better with those.
Yeah. Well, and non-homogenized. Can you
Yes.
tell us what homogenized means?
Homogenized basically, like, breaks up the fat, so if you were to milk a Jersey cow, for example, if you let the milk just sit, you'll see the cream rise to the top and then the liquid part of the milk go to the bottom. That's, like, unappetizing for
But it's
big food
natural.
companies, but it's
And it's
natural, and all
natural.
you have to do is shake the bottle,
Yeah.
shake the bottle. So they again, thinking that they're smarter, they do this homogenization process, and that's been shown to really disrupt what's called the MFGM, milk fat globule mod something, MFGM. Homogenization really disrupts that, and so it's processed a little bit differently for
So in the body, it
yeah,
potentially could cause more
could cause some
digestive
problems,
distress.
yeah.
Okay, so there's the homogenization. That's probably like the worst. We would want to avoid that.
Yep,
Then there's the vat pasteurized
yep.
or just regular high temp, short, whatever, HT, something, something, pasteurization. And then there's the low temp
Fat pasteurized, that's what
vat
Kelowna
pasteurized,
and Alexander are.
which is rare to find,
Yeah, it's
but
hard to
there
find.
are some brands available in the grocery store.
Yeah.
And then there's, raw.
It's yep, yep.
Sorry, I should have been going this way as like, this is the ideal. So yeah, so that's helpful for people if they can't find somebody, that there are options they could try in the grocery store. And then there's the whole, we haven't even gotten into this, but there's the whole idea of A1 versus A2 proteins too. So I believe that Kelowna is not exclusively A2, but Alexander either has a line in their brand or is exclusively A2. I don't remember. So there's always different options
And
available.
Food Club sells raw A2 cheeses made with traditional animal rennet.
Yes. And you guys, okay, we've
That's our food
only
club, Nourish Food Club.
Nourish Food Club. This podcast is sponsored by
We
Nourish
don't
Food
have
Club. It's
we
not.
don't have sponsors.
This is such a fun topic because, okay, the body has a microbiome, right? And then we have a skin microbiome. Okay. And one of the coolest things you can do with raw dairy is actually use it as a beauty product. I have done the Greek yogurt, the raw Greek yogurt, or you can do the raw skyr yogurt face mask before, and it is like life changing. It is so refreshing on the face. If you've got blemishes or some pimples, it really can work to reduce all that. And I don't know enough about beauty care, but I know there's something where people are like, you want to use lactic acid. Am I wrong about that? I don't
Like
know.
ancient cultures like Cleopatra that took raw milk
You took
baths
baths,
all
right,
the time.
but you're putting that product on your face and you're helping if you have some sort of maybe skin barrier issue or disrupted microbiome of the face.
Yeah.
That could potentially help. So I've definitely tried that. It is so fun to do. I feel like an insane person, but yeah, so that is just I mean, I'm sure that if you're gonna use yogurt, you could technically do that with the pasteurized product because like we've talked about, they do add those
Cultures.
cultures back.
Yeah,
And
which
that's the
we've
whole
learned.
point of this.
What are cultures?
Vegetarian. So that's the whole point of this, but, I don't think it would be the same experience bathing in pasteurized milk versus bathing in raw milk necessarily. But yeah, there's the
But outside of those, there's eatwild.com, www.eatwild.com, and then
yeah,
getrawmilk.com.
there's like a whole raw milk finder available online where you can find a small local farmer. But I will say that because it's become such a hot topic, like with Kennedy talking about it, and which brings a lot of hate, but also a lot of interest in raw milk, it's getting increasingly harder to find a steady source of raw milk. So that is what, you know, like you said with the raw cheese, just finding some sort of food club that can offer it to you is also helpful.
I hope that this helps m make everyone question things, right? I do think that finding the highest quality food you can afford and find will improve health over time, especially given these weird fortified dairy products that are happening, and encourage you to kind of have like a more food empowerment mindset instead of food fear. Because anytime that we are in like this state of fear, it just doesn't lead to the best decisions, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah. And just you see people who do well on dairy and you see people who don't do well on dairy. It's not something that's going to make or break somebody, but if you've struggled and you haven't found answers, raw milk, raw dairy might be very helpful for you. I think that there's been a number of people that we've worked with in our course or have literally just commented on a post or we've talked to since we've been in this community for a really long time who have literally had their life changed by raw dairy.
And you can't deny things like that.
No, and but at the same time, then we have people who say, like, "Oh, try it, didn't work for me." So not everybody's the exact same, but it's definitely something that one should feel empowered and safe enough to try for themselves if they feel inclined. And I think that was kind of the message here.
But we should conclude with this. We are not medical professionals. Everything shared in this podcast episode is for informational purposes only. And I don't remember the end of the disclaimer, but this is not medical advice. Seek health consult from professionals that you feel comfortable discussing with. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we should let Pip say goodbye.
Yes, all right.
So again,
She's
Pip
like,
is
"Leave
the
me
house bird.
alone." If you guys were wondering, you saw her fly for a hot sec. She does have her wings.
Oh,
Oh,
she
she
did
pooped
poopy
on
on
my
the chair.
chair,
We
my
got to clean
white
that.
chair. She does have her wings trimmed right now. We did that originally, and she was able to, like, post in the house, and Brandon recently redid it, and he did a little bit too much, so she's having some flight issues. After this experience, I will not be trimming her wings because I love when she can fly confidently. But yeah,
Baby bird rescued, and now,
yes.
guys, her personality is
And
so
if you're
funny.
wondering, if you're like, "This is a wild bird, why are you keeping it?" She has been imprinted, and she would not survive a day in the wild, so therefore, you do not release rescues that have been imprinted, okay? I'm in a whole Facebook group with them.
You're very active on the Starling group.
If you need a little friend that's always there that doesn't actually like you, but you love it, rescue a Starling, but only if you're a nice person.
Sarah's baby fever in action, but yes. I love Pip so much. She's so great.
Yeah, if you're wondering, she didn't ask, but this is like I got this, I don't remember the brand, but it's like a fertility boosting tea. Got like red raspberry leaf, nettle, all the good stuff. So that's what I got here in a bottle.
Sipping on some tea.
So yeah.
All right. Well, until next time, stay rooted in resilience.